Hello, this is Clear Money Talk, where we turn complex financial concepts into practical insights. I'm your host, Tim Clairmont.
I'm Tyler Andrews. Welcome to the show. Today we're talking about, is your cash really working for you? Let's jump in.
Oh, all right. Is your cash really working for you? Okay. All right. This will be a fun topic. So, yes, and you're already aware that this is the topic, obviously, given that this is the reason why you've chosen the show. So, I'm just becoming aware of it. So, let's go through this. Is your cash really working for you? You know, when you think about your cash and where you may have it deposited, I mean, you know, you could literally have cash in a safe. Obviously, you know it's not working for you if it's cash in a safe. You're losing to inflation. The money value is decreasing as expense increases for so many other things. I mean, you know, the common items that are talked about are like gasoline or milk or bread, you know, the sort of staples that we deal with on a regular basis. The cost of those items increases over the years, and that's what we refer to as inflation. And on average, that tends to go up somewhere between 3 and 5% historically on an annual basis. So if you have your cash literally in a safety deposit box or a safe, you're effectively losing 3 to 5% per year to inflation. If inflation's higher, you're losing more. So usually you're trying to figure out how to compete with inflation to try to just retain your purchasing power. And that's why people will put it into safe locations like, you know, bank accounts and you know, checking, savings, CDs, that kind of stuff. It's safety of principle, so you don't lose your principal, but you know, is your interest rate high enough to keep up with inflation so that you actually retain purchasing power as well? I think that's the gist of what we're talking about here, and that's really what you want to look at. How do you mitigate that loss of purchasing power that is pretty much inevitable if you're going to choose to put your money in a location where you have a guaranteed return of principal? And that's, you know, the gist, I would say, of is your cash working for you?
Yeah, thank you for all that, Tim. I think the reason I chose this topic is that there's definitely a hidden cost of safe money, if you will. Americans right now, just a quick statistic for us, I love statistics, as we all know. Americans are holding a record amounts of cash and savings right now. 17 trillion is what the number just came in at recently this year in 2025, which is record amounts of extra cash and savings. And with inflation still being persistent, we're still hovering around 3 to 4%. Fed's working hard to bring that down to a more sustainable amount, but inflation's inevitable, right? It's just a way of life. Just like you have to breathe if you're alive, inflation happens. And with that being the case, is your savings and your cash really working for you as hard as you think it is, or are you losing purchasing power without even being aware of it? So I thought this was going to be a very valuable topic to talk about. Many of us like the feeling of having cash and savings and having that comfortability, but what comes along with that, the hidden cost of that, well, purchasing power, the erosion of that, and it's worth talking about, which is why we're here today. So hopefully you take some good, valuable takeaways as we continue to go into detail.
Yeah, that's solid. And I'm sure it is a topic that, well, clearly, if there's, $17 trillion?
17 trillion of cash and cash equivalents in the U.S.
That's a lot of money just sitting on the sidelines. And that's what cash is. It's sideline money. It's money that you're parking, you don't want to take a risk with. You know, there's an analogy that comes to mind that I use regularly with clients, which
I'm
is...
so happy you're bringing this up. I was waiting.
I think about if you well, frankly, I was born in the 70s. You know, I grew up in the 80s. If you grew up anywhere, I'd say in the 70s or 80s, you're probably familiar with the equalizer concept, this big radio thing that, you know, you move the knobs up and down, and it has, you know, ultimately like bass and treble and things like that. Nowadays, I mean, you could probably be born in the 90s and the early 2000s, and you're going to see like the DJ mixing thing where they're mixing the same stuff. So if that is an easier way to relate to it, frankly, we have something right in front of us, which is off camera for you right now, which gives us that same similar vibe. What I'm talking about here, though, as far as the analogy is concerned, is I want you to imagine that you have 3 levers that you could slide up or slide down. And each one of them has a rank between 0, when it's all the way down, and 10, when it's all the way at the top. Now, those 3 levers apply to your cash or your investments for that matter. The first lever is safety of principal. So when you're at a 10, you're going to say, I have 100% safety of principal. I'm not going to lose my cash as far as the nominal value of it. If you put $100 in, you're going to get $100 out. There's no loss of principal at a 10. Then you have the second one, which is liquidity. That's how much access you have to it. So if you also want full liquidity, you put that at a 10 as well. And so at a 10 on liquidity, you can access that money anytime you want. This would apply to things like checking accounts or savings accounts or money markets. They're pretty much fully liquid and fully safe, 10-10 in those first 2 categories. But you're not getting much into the way of the third category. The third category is rate of return. Now, if you're at a 10, you're getting the highest possible interest rate of return that you could theoretically get on an investment there. But as you're probably aware, the rate of return in a checking or savings account is not typically very high. In fact, it's almost certainly less than inflation. That's the way they're designed. So checking accounts often earn nothing, so you may have no rate of return. Savings accounts nowadays in the United States, at least, are probably somewhere between maybe 1 and 3%, with inflation running at 3 to 5. So you're losing a little bit of percentage on your savings accounts, but you get full liquidity and full safety of principal. You just have a very low rate of return, so you have a 0 in the third one. Now, every client I know wants 10, 10, 10. They want phenomenal rate of return, safety of principal, and access to all their money. That does not exist. That doesn't exist anywhere I know of. Essentially, you have 20 points to allocate. So if you have 20 points to allocate amongst those metrics, where do you want to allocate them? If you want a higher rate of return in the third one, you have to take away something from the first two. Now think of a CD. You want a little bit higher rate of return. A CD is typically paying somewhere in that maybe 2 to 4 or 3 to 5% rate of return, not usually beating inflation, usually just a hair under inflation, historically at least. But what do you give up? You give up some liquidity. So that 10 in liquidity is going to drop to like an 8. Because if you liquidate that account early, there's a penalty. You're going to lose some of your interest, and that's the nature of how these things work. So if you take a couple points away from the middle one, you add them to that right one, you might get a little bit higher rate of return. That would be like a CD. If you want to get higher than a CD-like rate of return, you're going to have to take more points away from either the liquidity or the safety of principal category. And what most people do when they're trying to beat inflation, if you're trying to earn more than inflation, is they take it away from safety of principal and they go with things like stock portfolios, mutual fund portfolios, where you don't have a guarantee that you're going to get your money back. You might lose money, but you're trying to get a higher rate of return. You're willing to take more risk by dropping down that first lever, increasing the third lever to try to get a higher rate of return. And in the long run, the asset classes we've seen historically, at least, that have beat inflation have been stock market and real estate, and more recently, things like some of the cyber currencies like Bitcoin and alternative investments, gold, things like that. We've seen some of that as well, maybe a little bit, depending on the period of time that you're looking at. So fundamentally, that's an analogy we use very regularly, and I hope that helps you frame how much risk you want to take in order to get a higher rate of return. You might say, at the end of the day, Tim, 10-10 in the first two is what really mattered to me. I've got safety of principal. I've got full liquidity. That's what I need right now. And if you're going to spend the money in the next 12 to 24 months, yeah, that's probably exactly where you should be. It's the money you're not going to spend in the next 24 months that you likely are going to park for at least 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, that you should probably start thinking about the long-term effect of losing to inflation and how are you going to offset that to try to preserve your purchasing power.
Yeah, and we're not here. I love the analogy that Tim just used. We use it all the time. I think it paints a great picture visually in your head, and it helps to put everyone, when we're talking about these things, on a very even playing field. However, we're not here to tell you how to move your levers. The levers are yours to move, whether you're DIYing it, doing it yourself, whether you're working with a financial advisor, which is what we do. Mm-hmm. We're not there to tell our clients what to do. We're there to collaboratively discuss those things and bring things to your attention. And at the end of the day, it's your decision, it's your money. You get to vote those dollars, as Tim talks about quite often, how you choose. However, sitting on the sideline does have these sometimes hidden costs, lack of growth, income, tax efficiency, things like that we're just trying to frame and put into picture for you guys today, which is why we're here. So
there you go.
Maybe we could talk about some smart alternatives, Tim. Sure. I'm thinking about things like a lot of people, when I see people and talk to people and they have a lot of cash, usually it's not cash, like you talked about earlier, Tim. It's not in a coffee can, it's not under your mattress. Usually it's in your checking or savings account or some function of those. And there are some easy low-hanging fruit options to try to improve your position, to try to optimize, if you will, the yield or the rate of return that you're actually getting on those cash and cash equivalents. Things I'm thinking about are CDs, you mentioned earlier, Tim, money market accounts, high-yield savings accounts, a lot of things that are very accessible to you that maybe are a very easy thing to upgrade. I'm using the air quotes right now if you're just listening to the podcast, upgrade to without having to do much work on your end, and also without having to take much risk too at the same time. Because I think that's the biggest component for many investors, or when it comes to cash, it's not much investing, but it's just people holding cash, is that they don't want that additional risk that comes along with it. So, yep. Tim, what are your thoughts on money markets, CDs, high-yield savings accounts? Things like that, to just try to better position yourself while still at the end of the day knowing that likely you're not outpacing inflation. You're probably matching it or losing still a little bit by using those at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I think that guarantee of principal, again, looking at that very first lever that we were discussing at a 10, the FDIC insurance associated with your deposits probably gives you a sense of confidence. And one thing you want to double check is to make sure that the amount of money you have on deposit with a particular bank on a per account basis is still compliant with the maximum amounts covered by FDIC, if that matters to you. That may be important to you, that may not be that important to you. FDIC insurance will also still cover those deposits that are in those high yield savings accounts. If the high yield savings accounts are with a bank or even a credit union, they have an equivalent credit unions. Alternatively, CDs are also typically covered by that FDIC insurance. And so if that matters to you from a safety of principle standpoint, to reassure you, that's important. Money markets, on the other hand, are not covered by FDIC insurance. So when you give up that FDIC insurance element, you might get a little higher interest rate and still maintain full liquidity. So that's an example of you saying, hey, I want a little higher interest rate in that third lever. I don't want to give up full liquidity. Instead, what if I give up maybe 1 or 2 points of the safety of principle? By eliminating that FDIC insurance, you can go into the money market scenario and have full liquidity. And generally speaking, the historical value of money markets has not lost money. That is the history of it, but it's not guaranteed to not lose money in the same way that a savings account, high yield savings account, CD, checking savings accounts, generally speaking, are typically guaranteed by the institution to not lose money. That's hopefully gives you a little bit of insights into some of those cash equivalents.
Yeah.
And those are the low-hanging fruit options, as you said. That's going to shrink the impact of loss of purchasing power, but it's not going to solve the problem. So if you have all that money in money markets or CDs or high-yield savings accounts, they're not designed to earn equal to inflation or greater than inflation by any means. Now, they might in a short period of time. For example, interest rates popped a little bit last year and the year before. So in 2024, 2023, we had a little higher interest rates, and inflation was pretty high in 2023. So, I would say you still lost to inflation, but in 2024, we got inflation down. Interest rates were still a little higher. So you might have actually been able to beat inflation for 1 year. 2025, we're already seeing inflation sitting there. Interest rates are now coming down lower, and you're likely, I would say at best, going to probably break even this year on inflation, even if you were in some CDs. You might even think that you're still earning those interest rates on your CDs or your savings accounts that you might have been earning in 23 and 24. In reality, in 25, those have likely dropped. If your CDs have matured in the last 6 to 12 months, you're likely earning a lot less than you think you are. And if you're in a savings account or a money market position, your yield on those accounts are also probably less than you think it is. So you should take a look at what your cash is really earning right now, because you might find that it's not earning what you think it is.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. I think there's a good exercise we can do.
Okay.
Tim, and you do this with clients, which is finding your comfort level of cash and cash equivalents. Because I think there's a balancing act here between how much you actually strategically need liquid to fund your emergency fund, to fund upcoming expenses that are defined, to fund your comfort level so you can sleep soundly at night, versus missing opportunity costs that could potentially align strategically with your broader financial plan, whatever that might be for you. And I really think there's 3 types of money when it comes to your existing assets and your income. Your income is your best wealth building tool that you have if you're still earning money. The first is planned or reoccurring expenses, is I think kind of the first money type, as I like to think about it in my head, which is your mortgage payment, your rent payment, your utilities, your groceries, you're spending money on a monthly basis. That money is assigned, right? Your second bucket of money is your emergency fund, whatever size that might be for you. Also your comfort level, whatever that might be for you, plus planned expenses, things that you're going to be saving and planning for, whether you're trying to buy a house in the next few years or buying a new car or vacation or funding a tuition, college payments for children or grandchildren. Those are defined expenses that likely would make sense to keep in safer cash and cash equivalents if your time horizon is not too far out. I think that's another thing we're talking about. Everything else is worth thinking about and considering investing for you, so that way it's not reaching a stagnation point with your cash, which is what the whole point of this podcast is talking about. Now, I want to go back to step 2, which I was just talking about, which is defining your comfort level and your emergency fund. A lot of people like to talk about their emergency funds, which is great. We like to phrase it in a different capacity, which is more talking about your comfort level. And we have a way of kind of figuring that comfort level out with clients, because there's no golden rule of thumb or answer. There's some general rule of thumbs that many economists and and smart people out there will tell you, 3 to 6 months or whatever that might be. But there's also some more emotional ways to come to that comfort level number, which, Tim, I love the way you go about doing that with clients and other people. And I think that's worth mentioning if you're okay to share that.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great idea. So as far as your emergency money, there are two buckets of liquid money that we look at. One is what we refer to as your emergency money. The other is your fund money. Your fund money is that bucket of money that you want to keep there to cover whatever random expense you might want. You want to go buy a boat, second residence, contribute to charity in a large way. Maybe you have a very big purchase, a big trip, something like that's coming on. Fund money is separate. Right now, we're going to focus on emergency money first, because emergency money is that bucket of money you need to keep safe and liquid just in case an emergency comes up. And a lot of people don't really know how much they should have to keep safe and liquid. And as we just talked about, if you're losing to inflation, you want that number to be as low as possible so that you're not losing too much to inflation. But on the other hand, it needs to be high enough to cover whatever emergencies you might have. So as Tyler mentioned, there are a lot of different rules of thumb out there, but no golden rule, no sure thing that you should do this, at least in our opinion. It's a personal choice. So when you think about it, some of those rules of thumb might be 3 months of your living expenses, 6 months of your living expenses, 1 year of your living expenses. Those are all reasonable rules of thumb to consider. But we find in general it's easier to do a subjective gut test to determine where your comfort level is. And to figure out your comfort level, now first of all, if you're driving right now, I want you to skip the part where I tell you to close your eyes. So do not, obviously if you need your vision and you're just listening to us right now, then I would keep your vision. But if you're in a place where you can close your eyes, then I encourage you to go ahead and close your eyes and think about, imagine that you had $100,000 in US dollars sitting in your savings account, not earning a very high interest rate, not beating inflation, but it's liquid and it's safe. Do you feel like that's enough money to cover whatever kind of emergency might arise in the short term? If you have other funds available in other places that are maybe a little less liquid, maybe a little bit more smartly invested to try to earn higher returns, is that 100 grand enough? Now, if your immediate gut check is, Tim, nope, that's not enough, I need 200 or whatever, that's fine. Bump yourself up and get to where you need to get to, and then apply this in a similar way once you feel comfortable, and then you'll go through the process. But for most people that we know, most of our clients, $100,000 is typically more than enough to feel comfortable for most emergency kind of situations. So let's go ahead and check. If you are comfortable at 100, you're like, many of you might be saying, man, it'd be great if I had $100,000. I've got like 5 grand in my savings account right now. I totally get that, but there are a lot of clients out there who do have 100 or even more than 100,000 sitting in the bank, sitting in money markets, CDs, savings accounts, high yield savings accounts, cash in a deposit box at a bank or in a safe at their homes. All of that is cash and cash equivalents. So if that is $100,000 and you feel like, yeah, that's probably enough to cover any emergency, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to pretend that it's not 100,000. I want you to pretend with me now it's 75,000. Are you still comfortable? Yeah. Most clients would probably say yes, but I want you to go through the process. Now pretend it's 60,000. It's 50,000. It's 45,000. It's 40,000. It's 35,000. At some point, as you keep going down 5,000, 30,000, 25,000, 20,000, you're going to have this gut moment where your gut goes, I feel uncomfortable. That's what we're looking for. Whenever that moment hits you where your gut feels uncomfortable, you want to add 5,000 back. For a lot of our retirees, they get uncomfortable at 45,000, and then we add 5,000 back, and 50,000 becomes their comfort level number. We want to make sure we keep that much money liquid and safe. We don't care if it earns a lower rate of return than inflation because you have to be comfortable. But it then sets that threshold to say if you have more than that, we should probably look at trying to get a higher rate of return, dial up that third lever, and decide which of the two levers, the first two levers, are we going to dial down? Are you going to dial down your safety and take some risk like stocks and bonds and mutual funds and things like that? Or are you going to dial down your liquidity and still potentially get a higher rate of return without taking risk on safety principle? That would be products, things along the lines of fixed indexed annuities or fixed annuities. There are insurance contracts that you can go into which will tie up your liquidity to some degree, similar to a CD, but they have the potential of earning higher returns than inflation. And that's another way of dialing up your rate of return without shrinking your risk of loss of principal, and it's just dialing down your liquidity. There are various products out there as far as alternatives, but Hopefully you have better clarity around how much money you want to keep for emergencies to feel safe, and that will identify that, what we call your guilty bucket number. So if you have 50,000 in that account and you have an expense that pops up and that 50 goes down to 45, that gut check reaction kicks in and says, oh my gosh, I don't feel good right now. Totally get it. That way you spend less the next month, kind of like going on a diet, and get the 45 back up to 50 again, and then you feel comfortable again. So you want to stay right at that threshold, just a little bit above where you get uncomfortable. So if you dip into it, the guilt kicks in, and then you'll go ahead and make sure you get back to that number again. Keep that in a separate account from your fund money. Your fund money has no rules on it. You can have an unlimited amount of fund money. You can have millions of dollars in fund money. That's great. Good for you. Like, go enjoy it. You can roll around in your gold like Scrooge McDuck, right? It's like whatever you want to do with your fund money is up to you. And by the way, your kids' college money, you want to know where that goes in the picture? That's fund money. Whether you have fun giving it to them for college or not, that's optional. That's up to you. But fundamentally, it's not part of your emergency money. It's not part of your retirement money. It's money you're just going to be paying for, college expenses, and that goes in that fund money category. Of course, if you know you're not going to touch the money in the next few years in your fund money bucket, we still might invest that to try to earn a higher rate of return and beat inflation. But it is separate from your emergency money, so we refer to the fund money as your guilt-free bucket. So you have a guilt-free bucket and a guilty bucket.
I just love that exercise, Tim. Thank you for going through it. I think it's such a great way to find your comfort level. I think all of us are trying to find that golden nugget of what should I do? Just there's so much information, data, opinions out there, and people just want to know what should I do at the end of the day, Tim, Tyler. And unfortunately, there's no one-stop answer. There's no layup here. But I think exercises like that can help to bring it to a more emotional, personal touch, which is important because what works for some person, your next door neighbor, whoever, might not work for you. I think that's important. And I think the whole purpose of the podcast, again, is your cash really working for you? It's going to be a very personal answer depending on what your situation looks like. And I think the real risk here is not volatility, it's stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want your money to stagnate, especially the younger you are, the bigger the risk that is for you over long periods of time. So
good. Well, why don't we wrap up with just the answer?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll transition from there. So
that's perfect.
Why don't we restate the topic for the just the answer, and then we'll maybe go back and forth a little bit.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So the topic again was: is your cash really working for you? So I hit us really quick with the statistic. Americans have hit record highs of cash and cash equivalents up to 17 trillion as of when we're recording this podcast right now, which produces some sometimes hidden costs that come along with having too much cash and cash equivalents. And Tim?
Yeah. And the basic issue here is is your cash working adequately for you? It's all about comparing your rate of return on your cash to inflation. And if you're earning less than inflation, you are losing your purchasing power. We talked earlier in the show about some levers and some good analogies as far as ways to look at addressing your risk level versus as far as safety of principal versus your rate of return versus your liquidity. So those are all discussed in the long version of the show. And we also talked about building out an appropriate amount of money for your emergency fund and your fund money to keep that liquid and try to figure out a good balance for that. If you want some good exercises and some insights into how to do that, I encourage you to listen to the long version of the show. But as far as just the answer, the bottom line here is your cash working for you or not? If you're earning equal to or greater than inflation, it is. That's highly unlikely in any cash position. More than likely, you're earning less than inflation, and therefore you are losing purchasing power every year. That's okay for a certain amount of money, but not all your money, and not too much money.
Yeah, your cash should have a purpose, not just be a balance, right? Mm-hmm. A well-designed plan uses liquidity intentionally, right? If you feel like you are overweighted with your cash and cash equivalents, give it a second look. Consider some alternatives. Listen to the podcast, what you're doing right now, and reach out if you think we can help you.
Yeah, and there's more alternatives in the long version. So
that's right. Yeah,
all right.
Right.
Let's
ready for some trivia.
Yeah, let's go.
It's kind of trivia today, so I'm switching it up. All right. So our loyal listeners, I will always hit Tim with a trivia at the end of the podcast. We like to leave on a more soft note, if you will. And I got a riddle for you today, Tim.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I'm trying to tie these into the podcast topic, the trivia or riddles. So, are you ready?
I think I'm ready. Is this a real riddle that's been around for a long time, or is this like a ChatGPT invented?
It's
riddle?
Like a it's a generated AI.
Generated riddle. AI riddle. Okay, so it could be fresh and something.
It could be totally wrong. Just
could
because
be wrong.
AI is wrong often.
That
You
can
need to
happen.
validate the results it gives you.
All right, hit me with it. What do you got?
I get better the longer you leave me alone, but only if I'm stored in the right conditions. Left in the wrong place, I lose my flavor fast. What am I?
I get better the longer you leave me alone, but only if left in the right conditions. If I get left in the wrong place, I lose my flavor fast. Better the longer you leave. My gut is like a marinade, like I'm feeling like, but I feel like that's not a good enough answer. So, obviously a marinade, things get better as far as whatnot. And if you leave it alone, that would be applicable. I almost think like gum, but that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't get. I guess it doesn't really get better if you leave it alone. It just kind of stays the same. So,
I thought this was a layup for you, Tim.
Oh, I don't know. Did it get better the longer you leave me alone? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, go. What you
ready
got?
for it?
Yep.
Wine.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah.
Because just like cash, where you keep it determines whether it grows in value or goes flat.
Oh, that's
quietly
good.
goes flat.
Quietly goes flat. That's right.
Yeah.
Of course, you can leave wine alone a long time, and then it gets nasty.
That's true. That's true.
No matter how good.
That's why where you keep it determines.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So you got to store it in the right condition.
That's exactly. Yep. Spot on. Thank you for spending your minutes with us and joining us on Clear Money Talk today. I think we'll bring it to a close there.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. If you found value in this episode, please consider sharing it with a loved one. We'd also love if you would subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.
Excellent. We appreciate you supporting Clear Money Talk. And if you need help and you want to get an insight into how you might be able to improve your ROI, your return on investment, as far as your cash situation is concerned, or reevaluate the amount of cash that you have in your guilty bucket or your guilt-free bucket, as referred to previously, don't hesitate to reach out to us, 503-579-1000, or you can find us on the internet at clearfp.com. That's clear, C-L-E-A-R, F as in Frank, P as in Peter.com. Thanks for joining us on Clear Money Talk.
Till next time.
All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. Examples referenced are hypothetical only and do not represent the actual performance of any particular investments. Converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. A Roth IRA offers tax-free withdrawals on taxable contributions. To qualify for the tax-free and penalty-free withdrawal or earnings, a Roth IRA must be in place for at least 5 tax years, and the distribution must take place after age 59.5 or due to death, disability, or a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime maximum. Depending on state law, Roth IRA distributions may be subject to state taxes. Distributions from traditional IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans are taxed as ordinary income and, if taken prior to reaching age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% IRS tax penalty. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks and charges, and expenses of mutual funds and ETFs carefully before investing. The prospectus, which contains this and other information about the funds and ETFs, can be obtained directly from the company or from your financial professional. The prospectus should be read carefully before investing or sending money. A diversified portfolio does not assure a profit or protect against loss in a declining market. Dollar cost averaging will not guarantee a profit or protect you from loss, but may reduce your average cost per share in a fluctuating market. Investors cannot invest directly in indexes. The performance of any index is not indicative of the performance of any investment and does not take into account the effects of inflation and the fees and expenses associated with investing. Although it is possible to have guaranteed income for life with a fixed annuity, there is no assurance that this income will keep up with inflation. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years or during the rate guarantee period. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years that you own the contract. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may result in a 10% IRS tax penalty, in addition to any ordinary income tax. The guarantee of the annuity is backed by the financial strength of the underlying insurance company. Investment subaccount values will fluctuate with changes in market conditions, and investment in a variable annuity involves investment risk, including possible loss of principal. Variable annuities are designed for long-term investing. The contract, when redeemed, may be worth more or less than the total amount invested. Variable annuities are subject to insurance-related charges, including mortality and expense charges, administrative fees, and the expenses associated with the underlying sub-accounts. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, and charges and expenses of the variable annuity carefully before investing. The prospectus contains this and other information about the variable annuity. Contact Clear Financial Partners at info@clearfp.com or 503-579-1000 to obtain a prospectus, which should be read carefully before investing or sending money. The cost and availability of life insurance depend on factors such as age, health, and the type and amount of insurance purchased. Before implementing a strategy involving life insurance, it would be prudent to make sure that you are insurable by having the policy approved. As with most financial decisions, there are expenses associated with the purchase of life insurance. Policies commonly have mortality and expense charges. In addition, if a policy is surrendered prematurely, there may be surrender charges and income tax implications. The target date of a target date fund may be a useful starting point in selecting a fund, but investors should not rely solely on the date when choosing a fund or deciding to remain invested in one. Investors should consider funds asset allocation over the whole life of the fund. Often target date funds invest in other mutual funds, and fees may be charged by both the target date fund and the underlying mutual funds. The principal value of these funds is not guaranteed at any time, including at the target date. Citiere does not offer any direct investments, endorsements, or advice as it relates to Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. This is for informational purposes only. Bank certificate of deposits are insured by an agency of the federal government and offer a fixed rate of return, whereas both the principal and yield of investment securities will fluctuate with changes in market conditions. Clear Financial Partners is located at 15573 Bangui Road, Suite 100, Lake Oswego, Oregon 97035. For more information, please call us at 503-579-1000.